This Northwest Children's Foundation annual gathering is really special to me. It's got a special kind of meaning and connection. And I understand we have hundreds of folks from far-flung places joining us today. It makes me feel your energy all out there flowing across these many time zones, across latitudes and longitudes, arcing over our curvature of our globe. I want to acknowledge how ironically hard and timely it is to gather today. It is important right now that we are affirming something by coming together, that we are projecting unity, warmth across demographics and identities, and a continued commitment, no matter what, to express and practice our belief in humanity. We affirm our promise through imperfect but persistent learning endeavors to manifest the beloved communities we know are possible and that our youth especially deserve. Let's just stipulate from the start, we're all going through a lot, and we're committed to granting each other grace today. I know I need all the grace and love you're willing to share. I've been finding it a bit harder to put coherent thoughts together these days. I know I'm not the only one who's been going through it like this. Some of it on the very personal, very vulnerable level. Some of it on the larger level, things happening or about to happen around us. This is some kind of time we're in. For many, it was a hard year before this, and then something else altogether is on the horizon. We're all in it. I'm not at my best today, but I'm going to do my best today. I might stumble a bit. I hope some images and your own interview, your own inner eye and guide will help the words that I share with you transport you a little bit. I'm going to subject you to some weird stuff, some nerdy stuff, and some poetry. And I hope you find something useful in this roaming entanglement. I'm wondering how you are. I hope you're taking good care of yourselves. I'm thinking about you, the good things you do, the things you struggle with. I'm wondering how you are in this time on the verge. It feels like we're on the verge, doesn't it? It feels like we're about to enter a period when the battle, the good fight, whatever that might be, will look more like being forever on defense with no space for offense. The climate we're entering almost disparages, squelches the possibility of bold advancements, cautioning us instead to focus on preventing the further erosion of hard-won progress, preventing further erosion after already having lost significant ground, after already having lost ground in things like a woman's bodily autonomy, having lost ground on the work to promote diversity, on the work to advance equity. I'm wondering how you are. It seems we've been sitting on the verge. I feel like some of the people I know have been choosing to tap out a little bit for a little while, suspended their connection for a bit to the roiling nature of the emerging realities. I've taken up a position slightly outside the spewing news cycles for a little while. Some folks I know have taken to watching from some balcony, if just for a while. I get it. Things around us can feel like they're spiraling well out of our control. It can feel like the one aliquot of control that we can exert for a minute anyway is to check out, to choose to spend a little time unconnected to news because we all see what's coming. Selections have been made and consequences will start to flow. We know what we've been dealing with personally, societally, and we know that what's coming, what's headed our way. As forces march up our streets to erase and dehumanize immigration, to undermine the underpinnings of decency, to deepen wealth gaps, diminish dignity, move basic human rights further into the distance, lay further waste to our environment. It feels like we're on the verge. As a political tsunami approaches, I'm wondering how you are, knowing that soon you'll need to stir from that perch on the balcony. How will you find your kinetic energy again? How will you reignite your momentum and respond to the impending reality? How will you respond? I think about where you are, and as your eyes begin to acknowledge the conscious impulse to open your lids on the world, as stirrings begin to penetrate your inner quiet, begin to whisper in your not yet alert ears as pre-contemplation begins to rouse nerve endings, begins to prepare for the first twitches of muscle fibers, as our circulation ramps up in anticipation of movement. What are we readying ourselves for? How will we respond? What do we feel capable of? As our eyes gain focus and we start to see predictions morphing into realities, the things approaching, mutating into the things that are here on this ominous verge, as the good fight reveals itself anew, how will we respond? I think about the timeout period we were just in. There was a certain kind of repose about it. There was a way to say, I'm not doing anything more right now. A way to reject external input, set the tools down, and say, I'll pick that up again, but not right now. There was a way of being, a way of becoming disembodied in those moments just past on that verge. For some people I know, it evoked an out-of-body experience, conjured an anachronistic pause, achieving a sort of active inaction. And it was justifiable. It was a pause with merit, because we all have some inkling, some certainty that the impending time marching toward us will take a toll on us. Some folks stopped time for a moment or two, just like it was for Schrodinger's cat. Now, maybe you know this thought experiment, Schrodinger's cat. Fair warning, this is a nerd alert, and this is a hypothetical. No actual cats were harmed running this experiment. Schrodinger's cat is a thought experiment that lends insight into the quite counterintuitive nature of quantum mechanics. A thought experiment goes something like this. Hypothetically, a cat is placed in a box and the lid is closed. And inside the box with the cat is a device that can release a radioactive substance. Now, the theory says, as long as we don't lift the lid and open the box, we don't know if the radioactivity has been activated and killed the cat or not. We don't know if the cat is dead or alive as long as we don't check. This is the quirk of quantum superposition. In quantum mechanics, things can exist in multiple states at the same time, like the cat, while it's in the unopened box, both alive and dead. As long as we don't examine it, a quantum particle can exist in different states. As long as we don't look in the box, the cat is both alive and not alive. This paradox, based on not doing something, can be a powerful lens through which we can understand our universe. And it's a powerful way to exponentially amplify computing power through quantum computing. There is a power, ironically, and I guess you would call it a resting power, in the suspended state of not quite acknowledging. Besides that being a nerd out opportunity regarding quantum physics, maybe Schrodinger's cat also describes that moment folks have been in, on the verge of something and choosing not to look, by some version of intentional inaction. They've been Schrodinger. The box remained closed for a little while, and that's been okay. I imagine it's been therapeutic to have indulged in disbelief about the future our country has beckoned in just a little bit longer, to have resided in unbelief of what will be asked for us in the coming time for just a little while longer, to take a beat, have a pause, hold a diastole, freeze that metronome, to not have opened the box for just a little while. Maybe it's been part of their rest these past few months. The pause will allow them to be more present in the coming present moments, more present with those they love, more attuned to their own needs and cares, more connected to our source of loving and knowing and showing up just this past little while. Maybe it's been part of folks taking the time they've needed to know themselves, to usher in some healing. Maybe it's been a reminder, a reverie, if you will, a reminder of how much good there is in the world, of what it looks like to treat other human beings humanely before we are subsumed by trying to fend off a coming time of inhumanity. Maybe it's been part of a readying themselves. Maybe the pause has been just what the healer prescribed. Maybe this pause has afforded the opportunity to weatherize, to seal up, and insulate against the erosive forces we are destined to face. I got to say, I'm good with that. I understand why it made sense to take a beat, to not open that box. I'm fine with a little nerdy dabbling in quantum superposition. I'm okay with lingering a while where many things are possible. I'm fine with folks who have chosen to be Schrodinger for a little while. Our pauses are probably as important as our actions. Pauses are as important as actions when it comes to achieving an impact. Being intentional in the way that we rest or pause is as much a critical strategy as the intention with which we map out our activities. A pause is as meaningful as the active as the pause. Rest is not a luxury or an afterthought, or rest is essential, elemental, foundational, right. Timing of rest is essential to the value of rest. Rest, as 4 letters of restoration, is not separate from the time we spend achieving the things we care most about. Rest is essential to those achievements. There are plenty of undermining narratives in this society today, narratives that present themselves as virtues, that pose as approaches to being most productive, that front as the values that we're supposed to aspire to or humble brag about at least. There are many undermining narratives in this society, some of them asked to negate or deny our right to rest. Narratives that iconize overwork, that celebrate the so-called busiest of people, regardless of whether they're actually getting things done or not. Even in our more multi-generational workspaces, there are some where some are less susceptible to the overwork trope. I still wonder if their rest is actually restful, is actually restorative. Our own personal narratives about work might vary, yet I'm not sure how many, regardless of personal narrative, have truly cultivated restorative rest, especially in the fields you all have chosen, or for many of you, the fields that have chosen you. I haven't met most of you, but I venture to say you are among the folks who practice a rarefied level of dedication. You cherish a connection to your avocation that is much more relationship-based than it is transaction-based. You practice a relationship-centering approach to your work. Your work is based on relationships, deepened by relationships, dependent upon relationships. I see y'all. Game recognizes game. Your work asks so much of your hearts, plumbs the depths of your spirits, asks you to lay bare your tenderest vulnerabilities, compels you to tilt your most arduous efforts towards causes, goals, and outcomes whose best results may or may not often manifest, but for which the journey itself is of its own value. Work that simultaneously fuels your hope and maybe sometimes inflames your disappointment. You each have better words, better descriptions of what it means to do what you all do. I admit it, I'm not doing justice to your work. You know beyond any simple description what you give to your avocation, what it gives to and maybe takes from you. This is not a simple conversation, not a binary prospect. Your commitment to your cause, your dedication to your efforts, they say a lot about who you are as people, good folk. And I got to say this. Others can take advantage of your deep connection to your work. Others can start to expect you to sacrifice more, be compensated less, to forego even your rest, knowing you'll tolerate many things in order to answer your calling. This is a difficult bind. The good you feel you can do may sit in bright contrast to other agendas. A triad of dynamics can hold sway in your work. Heart work for you that goes beyond transaction, combined with high stakes, great consequences for those you serve and for you, further combined with systemic priorities that are counter to yours. Add to this triptych an environment of trauma that surrounds the work. Add to that a network of institutions that reek of ingrained racism and other oppressions. And now we have a pentad that suffuses the workspaces you ply. Which is why I bristle when words like, quote, burnout or exhaustion are used. These words place the activity solely within the bodies of those doing the work. Those words subtly place the locus of control, the onus on those experiencing it. Now, I got to admit, I'm kind of old, And so I can remember, and it reminds me way too much of the way public health used to talk about many health impacting things, things that we might now call social determinants, but back then they referred to them as personal choices. I'm not okay with terms like burnout or exhaustion. They don't capture the depth of contextual factors, the external things. It's not sufficient, in my view, to name what's happening inside our bodies without naming the context. Because without context, you could think somebody was exhausted purely based on the number of hours they worked. You might think it has something to do with a lack of stamina, some lack of fortitude, when it's just not the case. The context is important. The context is everything. So burnout isn't sufficient. Exhaustion just won't do. We need to be accurate, and that requires other words. To be honest, I'm not totally sure I have apt language to replace those words. I'll throw a couple out there. If you have ideas, please post them in the chat. Maybe instead of burnout, we should call it something like anguish. Instead of saying exhausted, we should talk about being beleaguered. To me, something like anguished means and speaks to the moral violations many of you are exposed to, made party to, things that are erosive of your integrity and your conscience. To me, something like beleaguered speaks to being beset by an unrelenting external assault on your sense of fairness and dignity and sustainability, a constant attempt to dim your guiding light, an unrelenting assault on your why. When we find more accurate descriptors, it points to more accurate remedies. When those external factors are properly placed in the context of our fatigue, then not only do we name the rest that we deserve, and I do mean deserve, not requested or hoped for, pleaded for, or grudgingly given, rest that is deserved. But not only that, when those external factors are placed in context, then we see that in addition to rest, we deserve to see the external factors change. We deserve to expect that those institutions and systems that are functioning exactly as designed must be reimagined, redesigned, reinitiated, redeveloped, and then realized. Rest without redesign is likely to continue to erode hope. Redesign as its own hard work, and it's too often put on our backs. For anyone doing it, redesigning our institutions and our systems without also affording restorative rest is just another way to keep us oppressed. Rest is a foundational right, is an inherent part of a healthy cycle, is the partner to the best of our efforts in our work. Rest is not idle, just like sleep is not passive. Just like our brains do not become comatose when we sleep. Our brains during sleep are hotbeds of activity, tending to under-processed issues, expressing things unexpressed in our wakefulness, exploring ideas and constructs beyond the bounds of daily realities, offering dreams full of curiosities and puzzles to contemplate, dreams that untether but are still wonderfully entangled with our wakeful doings, dreams that allow us to imagine, then render true the future that we seek. Langston Hughes wrote a poem about dreaming a world. He wrote, "I dream a world where all will know sweet freedom's way, where greed no longer saps the soul, nor avarice blights our day." You have to imagine it. Dream it up before you can make it happen. The power of dreaming, of imagination to help us name where we want to go. It's an amazing thing. If it hasn't yet been seen by us on this earthly world, then it must be imagination, dreams that help us define where we want to go. Not just what we want to get away from, not just what we want to stop seeing, whether that's injustice, being unhoused, incarceration, any of our many societal ills, not just the things we want to stop seeing or get away from, but what we want to start seeing, where we want to go towards. Defining where we want to go, it takes imagination. It takes a willingness to dream of something different than we see on the daily. Our dreams allow us to conceptualize a better world. Our minds practicing restorative alchemy when we sleep. Just like rest itself is more than idleness, there are ways to rest, to cultivate our ability to rest in ways that best beckon restoration. And then we rise. After rest, restorative rest, we rise. We rise. We rise because our restoration has enabled it. We rise because people are counting on us and we're counting on others. We rise because we never really lost sight of the promise of liberation. We rise in joy. We rise in our power. We rise because the times call for it. We rise because there's nothing else we can imagine doing. Okay, this is an oversharing alert. I recently endured a tribulation called a trial. I was calling for an accountability for the racism imposed on me and colleagues, and especially the families from our communities that an institution tried to deny and ignore and rebuff and distract away from for 2 decades. Each session of a trial is initiated by the frame, all rise. When the judge or the jury enters or leaves the room, all rise. Toward the end of the 2 months trial, every time I heard all rise, I thought about Maya Angelou. I thought about Maya Angelou's poem, and it helped me get through. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust I rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? Because I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room? Just like moons, like suns, with the certainty of tides, just like hopes springing high, still I rise. Did you want to see me broken, bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries? Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard, because I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my own backyard. You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I'll rise. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I'm a black ocean, leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise, bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I'm the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. Mm, 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 mm. Just as much as rest is our right, so is our act of rising. Rest, has been said, is an act of political activism, and rest comes in indivisible partnership with our act of rising. Rising to meet the next day, rising to say that in oppressing us, you have also been preparing us to rise. Rising to say we see what's coming, what these next years will bring, and we are resolute in our resistance. Rising to show we may have been bent, but we are not broken. Rising to express our dignity by dint of our posture. Raising our voices when we should, when we must. Raising our fists to express our anguish and our strength. Rise we should, rise we will, rise we must. There will be temptations, y'all, in the coming times to compromise the things dear to us because we think it might lead to progress, or at least to prevent regression. In a time that feels scarce, that feels unconducive to progress, it can feel tempting to make gouging compromises. We might cloak it in some convenient phraseology to make compromises more palatable. I heard one of those phrases the other day. What was it? That's right, it called it pragmatic progressivism. Be careful when you hear something like that, when you hear something is done in the name of something like pragmatic progressivism. We'll be tempted to defer our larger goals, to be wooed into the compromises that feel less confrontational, seem more comfortable. We'll be tempted in the coming time to defer our dreams, to think that we are only allowed to be on defense and forego the right for change. I hope that there are ways for us to remember that our values, personal and organizational, are not for sale, not for trade, are not rheostatic, turned to dim sometimes to avoid discomfort. Our values, They are poles held high to bear our banners in those good times, and they are rods that steady our gait and keep us upright in the harder times. I hope there are ways for us to remember in the coming times that only defending against the erosion of progress can actually lead us to defending a status quo, one that is already unjust, already causing great harm, which is why we must rise to this moment, especially in this coming moment, which is why we deserve rest, the rest that serves our restoration, that enables us to rise in whatever way is meaningful to us, in whatever way feeds our integrity, honors our ancestors, and sows the seeds of our best futures. So this is what I'm trying to say. If recently you spent some time on the balcony, choosing to sit it out for a minute, just for a hot minute, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that's okay. I think you deserve that. You deserve anything else you need as well. And now it's time to get off the balcony and rejoin the fray. It's time to rise. If we are to face what's coming in this country, then we must rest. Our rest must be restorative. We need to dream. We need to rise. We need, even during the waning tide of liberty that we are entering, especially during the waning tide of liberty that we are entering, to live our values, to adaptively navigate the currents and keep moving forward. We must continue to rise. Rise and call for the transformation we know we need, the transformation first visualized in our imaginations. This can feel like a lot, yet these parts of cycles, parts of the rhythms, these are the things that guide our journey, a journey that has always been there, has always been shared. We've always been co-destined. Destinies are linked across great distances, across greatest philosophical divides. Our destinies are linked, and I'm not talking about something intangible, some cosmic link. I mean, we are linked in the most direct, knowable, human-to-human kind of way, human to human, like your strenuous yet life-affirming work. The activist, Nikki Giovanni, had this whole thing down, in my view. Nikki passed away on December 9th, 2024, just a month or so ago. And I like to think that she was one of those folks who wanted to slide across the finish line of life with just maybe a nickel in her pocket, clothes all tattered up, dirt streaked across her face, screaming, "What a ride." She appreciated the journey, every bit of it. And she knew that life is measured in lives touched, not things accumulated. She wrote beautiful poems. She wrote this: "The tasks I can no longer complete are balanced by the love of the tasks gone past. I offer no apology, only this plea. When I'm frayed and stained and drizzled at the end, please someone cut out a square and put me in a quilt, that I may keep some child warm, and some old person with no one else to talk to will hear my whispers." Thank you.